Title: The cruise ship that almost became the next Titanic. A true horror story. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begin. The voyage into the storm. It started as a dream voyage, a luxury cruise through Norway's breathtaking fjords. On March 21, 2019, the Viking Sky left the port of Bergen under a gray winter sky, carrying more than 1,300 passengers and crew. They were promised the northern lights, gourmet dining, and serene views of the Arctic Circle. But within 48 hours, the ocean would turn on them. The passengers were mostly retirees, bundled in coats, smiling for pictures on the open deck. The air was crisp, the sea calm. As night fell, the lights of the ship shimmered across black waters like a floating city of glass. Few knew they were entering a stretch of ocean Norwegian sailors whispered about, Hustadvika Bay, known for wrecks, reefs, and storms that rose without warning. Early the next morning, subtle signs of trouble appeared. Winds grew restless, slamming against the steel hull. Waves began to rise, first 3 meters, then 5. A heavy silence spread across the decks as gray clouds rolled low and the horizon vanished into mist. In the control room, warning lights began to flash, one after another. An engineer frowned at the monitor. Low oil pressure, the message read. It blinked for a moment, then disappeared. The crew dismissed it. Just another glitch, they thought. But by noon, passengers could feel the ship trembling. The dining hall swayed. Plates rattled. Someone screamed as a chandelier began to swing like a pendulum overhead. The Viking Sky tilted sharply, then steadied, the lights flickering once, twice, before everything went black. Gasps rippled through the ship. The engines had failed. The once gentle hum of machinery was replaced by a haunting silence, broken only by the crash of waves. Without power, the ship drifted, helpless, toward a coastline lined with jagged rocks known as the shipbreaker's teeth. A retired pilot later said, "It didn't feel like a storm. It felt like the sea wanted us." Water began to breach the lower decks, flooding through shattered windows. Crew members shouted over the storm as emergency lights flickered on. The Viking Sky was now completely dead in the water. Outside, waves over 30 feet high pounded the ship. Every few minutes, a thundering impact made the entire vessel groan like it was alive and afraid. The captain sent a single message that echoed across the North Sea. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Viking Sky." Engines failed in storm conditions. 100 meters from rocks. The Coast Guard scrambled helicopters. But for those on board, each passing minute felt like their last. Somewhere deep below, inside the dark engine room, oil alarms kept flashing. Ignored, silenced, buried beneath the chaos. What no one realized was that this disaster had been years in the making. Chaos and desperation. The Viking Sky was never meant to go dark. Yet as its engines died one by one, the luxury cruise ship became a drifting coffin in one of the most dangerous stretches of sea on Earth. The passengers didn't yet understand what was happening, only that the lights were gone and the world had turned to thunder. The storm outside had grown into a monster. 90-mile-per-hour winds clawed at the decks. Rain slammed the windows like bullets of ice. Furniture skidded across the floors as the ship rolled from side to side. Elderly passengers clutched tables, praying, whispering, crying. One woman later recalled, "The floor moved like it was breathing, up, down, sideways. You couldn't tell which way was up." On the bridge, red alarms flashed across every panel, more than 1,000 warnings in less than a minute. The captain, drenched in sweat, tried to regain control. The engineers shouted from the lower deck that they were losing oil pressure. Without it, the diesel generators couldn't survive another surge. One spark of air in the oil lines could stop the entire system, and it already had. The captain ordered the anchors dropped, hoping to stop the drift. The sound of metal chains slamming into the sea echoed through the storm, followed by a sharp shudder as the anchors scraped across the seabed. They couldn't hold. The ship continued to slide toward the jagged shoreline, barely 300 meters from destruction. The situation grew worse by the minute. Freezing water flooded the lower corridors. glass shattered. Somewhere deep in the dining hall, a piano broke free and crashed against a wall. Lights flickered back for a few seconds, a cruel tease of hope, then died again. In the darkness, crew members moved like shadows, guiding passengers toward emergency stations. Life jackets floated across the wet floors. People held hands with strangers. Others simply stared out the window, watching as waves taller than houses struck the hull, each hit sounding like an explosion. At 1:20 p.m., the captain's desperate voice broke through the radio. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Viking Sky. Engines failed. Drifting toward rocks." The Norwegian Coast Guard received it instantly. Within minutes, 6 helicopters took off through the storm. But even the rescuers couldn't believe what they saw. A billion-dollar ship twisting helplessly in the wind, its decks swallowed by black water. Back inside, an engineer finally realized the truth. The sump tanks, the ship's oil reservoirs, were dangerously underfilled. The engines weren't starved by the sea, they were starved by negligence. Someone, somewhere, had failed to fill them. Passengers were now being airlifted 2 at a time, dangling above the waves under spinning rotors. The screams, the wind, and the roar of engines merged into one unending sound. But even as the rescue began, the ship's logs revealed something darker, records showing that engine oil warnings had been ignored for months. The same alarms that blinked today had blinked before, only to be cleared from the system without action. And now, the ghosts of those warnings had come alive. The hidden truth and haunting aftermath. By sunrise, the storm had lost some of its rage, but the ocean was far from merciful. The Viking Sky limped through gray waters, its hull shuddering with every pulse of the engines that had only just come back to life. More than 460 passengers had been lifted to safety through the night, 2 at a time, into freezing air as rotor blades fought hurricane winds. The rest waited, soaked and silent, on the upper decks. When the sun broke the clouds, it revealed what the night had done. Shattered windows, bent railings, cabins torn open like pages in a book. The sea was littered with debris, shoes, cushions, fragments of glass. Inside the ship, the smell of fuel and seawater hung heavy. Engineers worked in silence, afraid to speak of how close they'd come. The captain's log later revealed the Viking Sky had drifted to within a few hundred meters of sharp coastal rocks, less than 5 minutes from becoming another Titanic headline. When the investigation began, the story deepened into something far more disturbing than a storm. Maritime inspectors discovered the ship's oil sump tanks were 40% smaller than international standards required. The same flaw existed in its sister vessels, all approved, all cleared to sail. Documents surfaced showing that engineers had complained about missing technical manuals as early as 2016, warning that they didn't even know the correct oil levels for the engines. Their emails went unanswered. It was no act of nature, it was negligence disguised as luxury. One engineer's private report described it bluntly. "We have passengers' lives depending on a manual we don't have." Viking Cruises, faced with growing outrage, issued polished statements about unforeseen mechanical complications. Yet within internal records leaked later, investigators found chilling language, cost-cutting, delayed maintenance, and a refusal to delay departures even when key systems were flagged as incomplete. The Viking Sky had sailed blind into a storm because canceling the voyage would have been bad for business. Passengers were told they were lucky, but survivors described something else, a silence that followed them home. The sound of the storm replayed in dreams, the tilt of the room when they closed their eyes, the echo of metal twisting under pressure. Some never boarded a ship again. Others reported that, months later, they still felt the floor moving beneath them. To this day, the ship sails again, repainted, repaired, renamed by some passengers as the Cursed Liner. The company insists it's safe. Yet seafarers whisper that the North Sea still carries a strange echo near Hustadvika Bay, a low, rhythmic groan that rises with the wind, like an engine gasping for oil. Maybe it's only the waves. Or maybe, as one survivor said, some storms never end, they just change form. The Viking Sky nearly became a mass grave that night, not because of the sea, but because someone thought paperwork could wait. If you thought this story was terrifying, wait until you hear what happened in the next one. Subscribe before it drops.